All right, so let's talk about disorders of the immune system. The human immune system is a powerful and necessary system of defense with the potential to cause injury and disease. Defects in the immune system can range from hay fever to dermatitis, and abnormal immune functions are involved in things like asthma, anaphylaxis. This is the type of shock you hear about someone who's allergic to bee stings, for instance. Diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, and tissue graft rejection, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. Immunopathology is the study of diseases associated with an overactive or underactive immune system. Hypersensitivity or overreaction is what's going on in things like allergies and autoimmune diseases. In these types of diseases, the tissues of the body are, innocent bystanders attacked by the immune system because the immune system cannot, for one reason or another, distinguish what the body's own tissues from foreign material. Hyposensitivity or immunodeficiency is where the immune system doesn't function properly because it's either incompletely developed, it's being suppressed for some reason, or it has been destroyed due to chemotherapy or some other type of issue. Structures found in bacteria, such as the different toxins that they produce, can produce both types of sensitivities, both a primary immunodeficiency. This is a young man who was born with no immune system. There was a movie in the 1970s starring John Travolta when he was a young man called The Boy in the Plastic Bubble. Secondary immunodeficiencies are things that are caused possibly, again, by needing to take immunosuppressant drugs for some reason. Type 1 hypersensitivity is immediate. Hay fever is an example of that. Type 2 is antibody-mediated. Blood type incompatibilities. This is the type of reaction that occurs if a person with type A blood is given type B blood, for instance. Immune complex or type 3 hypersensitivities, things like rheumatoid arthritis or serum sickness. We'll talk a little bit more about rheumatoid arthritis in a little bit. And cell-mediated or cytotoxic things like graft rejection or something as simple as contact dermatitis. Type 1 hypersensitivities are those common allergies and anaphylaxis, hay fever and being allergic to dust dander and those kinds of things. Those are type 1. Type 2 are cell-mediated, again, blood group incompatibilities. It's a condition called myasthenia gravis, which we will talk about in just a little bit. Is a type 2 immunosuppressant issue. Type 3 is an immune complex, things like lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, serum sickness. Type 3, that's going to be the things that usually fall in the autoimmune category. And then finally, T cell response, the type 4 hypersensitivities, again, things like graft rejection and contact dermatitis. What is an allergy? An allergy is an exaggerated immune response that is manifested by inflammation. Generally, allergies are the body's responding to something in an unusual way, something that should be harmless. The products that cause these are called allergens. The allergens are the antigens that induce the allergy in the sensitive individual. Some people can, go out in the springtime when all the pollen is blooming and have no problem at all. Other people get those allergens and their eyes water, their nose runs, they start sneezing and coughing. A chronic local allergy such as hay fever is called an atopy. A systemic allergic reaction, which can be fatal in certain conditions, is called anaphylaxis. Generally, the things that are most serious in anaphylaxis are going to be airway obstruction. The inflammation in the throat literally closes off the airway, or circulatory collapse. The heart is not properly circulating blood. In the United States, nearly half the population is affected by airborne allergens, dust, pollens, and molds. The majority of these type 1 allergies are relatively mild. Asthma and some food allergies may require hospitalization and can cause death. Lots of people, for instance, are allergic to peanuts. So much so that labels now will contain warnings saying, this item was made in a factory that uses peanuts, so you should be cautious when using it. If you are a fan of candy bars, for instance, whichever company it is that makes the Snicker bar, golly, I've lost that company, but everybody knows the Snicker bar. Well, the Milky Way bar is made by the same company that makes the Snicker bar. Snicker bar has peanuts, Milky Way does not. But if you look at the Milky Way wrapper, it will say that this product is made in a factory that uses peanuts. Caution should be used by persons who are sensitive. Some allergies last for a lifetime. Some are outgrown, and others will develop later in life. Just because you're sensitive to pollen when you're 10 or 12 doesn't mean you are when you're 40. Classic example of a type of dermatitis that develops later. When I was a young lad, poison ivy, poison oak, those plants did not bother me at all. I could go through the forest, go through the woods, play in it, tear it off of fence rows. It never bothered me at all. Sometime in my early 20s, it started to break out if ever I got in contact with it. I can't walk within 5 feet of it now. If it's growing on a fence, I do not get close to that fence. If it's growing on a hedgerow, and if I can see those leaves, the old saying is leaves of 3, let it be. Whenever I'm out in the parks or in the forest, walking around, sightseeing, doing whatever, I am very cognizant of the plants around me because, again, early in my life, in my teens, poison oak, poison ivy did not bother me. Now it breaks out if I just come close to it. Generalized susceptibility to allergens is inherited, not the allergy itself. So we are genetically predisposed, some of us, to be sensitive to allergens. That doesn't necessarily mean we will be sensitive to all of them. The genetic basis for an atopy will be increased IgE production. The increased reactivity of the mast cells we talked about in the last chapter. Target tissues will have an increased susceptibility to the allergic mediators. And the prospect of a child developing an atopic reaction is 25% if the parents are afflicted, and 50% if the siblings or grandparents are also afflicted. So if you've got parents and a couple of brothers that are sensitive to poison oak, for instance, then you probably will be as well. It's a 50-50 shot that you will be. The industrialized world has created a hygienic environment. We have antimicrobial surfaces. We have well-insulated homes, etc. Lots of people today will spend a great deal of their lives never coming in contact with things in nature. And that is not necessarily a good thing because our immune system needs to be trained by interactions with microbes as we develop. As I tell students in my A&P classes and in my micro classes, those of you who have children, it is perfectly okay to let your child get dirty. Let them play in the yard. Let them play in the dirt. Clean them occasionally, but let them get dirty. It is through that getting dirty that they build their immune system. It has been shown that children who grow up on farms have a lower incidence of several types of allergies. Children who grow up on farms tend not to have hay fever. It's the kids that grow up in the city. And delivery by cesarean section and a maternal history of allergies elevates the childhood risk of allergies by a factor of 8. You pick up components of your immune system as you pass through the birth canal. If you don't get those because you were brought into the world by cesarean, then that makes you more susceptible to things you might otherwise have been protected against. Newborns who breastfeed exclusively for the first 4 months have a lower risk of asthma and eczema. The cytokines and growth factors found in human milk act on the baby's gut mucosa to induce tolerance to allergens. We then have a built-in protection. The Human Microbiome Project we talked about earlier shows us that there are 600 species of bacteria can be transferred to infants through breast milk. And that is an important role in the development of the tolerance levels to foreign antigens. As with all antigens, allergens have certain immunogenic characteristics. Proteins, for instance, are more allergenic than carbohydrates, fats, and nucleic acids. Almost everybody knows somebody with a gluten allergy. Gluten is a protein. Not a whole lot of sugar allergies out there. Not a whole lot of fat allergies. Some of these proteins or some of these antigens are haptens. A hapten is a non-protein substance with a molecular weight of less than 1,000. Don't worry, I will not ask you to remember that. Just remember these are small things that can form a complex with a carrier molecule, and then it becomes an antigen. These used to be referred to as incomplete antigens. By itself, this protein or this non-protein molecule is not allergenic. It is only when it combines with some other molecule that it develops its antigenic characteristics. Certain organic and inorganic chemicals found in industrial products, household products, cosmetics, food, and drugs can all be considered as, or can all act as haptens. How do these haptens or how do these allergens get into the body? Well, just like everything else, they have a portal of entry. The most common ones are the mucosa of the gut and the respiratory tract. This is a thin, moist surface. It's normally quite penetrable, which means it's easily penetrated by certain things. Your skin, however, is a dry, tough layer, contains a lot of a product called keratin. This is a generally less permeable layer. Things that can make it through the skin tend to pass through the skin through tiny breaks in the skin, through certain glands, and through your hair follicles. Inhalants are airborne environmental allergens, again, such as pollen, house dust, animal dander, fungal spores. All of those things can act as allergens. Ingestants are things that we get from food allergies, the things we get from eating certain things. Injectants are allergies triggered by drugs, vaccines, hymenoparentin, bee venom, for instance. Contactants are allergies that enter through the skin. Many of these are type 4 or delayed hypersensitivities. There's the contactants, there's the ingestants. Lots of people, for instance, are allergic to shellfish. What is it in shellfish that most people are allergic to? It's actually iodine, is what most people who have shellfish allergies are actually allergic to, is iodine. Mast cells are located in all connective tissues. I remember from a couple of lectures ago, mast cells are a specially modified monocyte. They are found in particularly high concentrations in the lung, in skin, in gastrointestinal tract, and the genitourinary tract. Each cell will carry between 30 and 100,000 cell receptors. Again, I will not ask you to remember 30 to 100,000 cell receptors. I will ask you to remember that there's lots of them on the surface of each cell. I also expect you to remember that they bind the IgE immunoglobulin type, and they will degranulate, which will then cause the release of the inflammatory cytokines that these cells contain. Allergy symptoms are not usually caused by the direct activity of the allergen on body tissues. However, what is going on is the physiology effects of the mast cell-derived allergic mediators on the target organs. So it's actually not the activity of the allergen, but it's the reaction of the mast cell to the allergen that causes the problem. Histamine is the most profuse and fast-acting allergic mediator. We've all seen the commercials on TV for antihistamines. Histamine constricts smooth muscles in the small bronchioles and the intestines, causes labored breathing, relaxes smooth muscles and dilates arterioles and venules, resulting in that characteristic wheal and flare reaction is the skin and itching. Also stimulates eosinophils to release cytokines, which increases or escalates symptoms of inflammation. Bradykinin is another allergic molecule, produces prolonged smooth muscle contraction of the bronchioles, dilation of the peripheral bronchioles, increased capillary permeability, and increased mucus secretions. All of these things, again, increased mucus secretions. That's where you get your runny nose and your runny eyes. The increased capillary permeability, that's where the skin gets flushed and the skin turns all red. Dilation of the peripheral arterioles. Again, that causes blood to flow into the body tissues, and your hands and your face start to get red. And then you get smooth muscle contraction of the bronchioles. That's where you get that tightness in your chest and you feel like you can't breathe. Serotonin. The effects of serotonin actually complement both these two. So these three things are released in a allergic reaction, and this one actually enhances the effects of these two. Leukotriene, another target molecule, is a slow reacting substance of anaphylaxis. It induces gradual contraction of smooth muscles, produces prolonged bronchospasm, vascular permeability, and mucus secretion, stimulates polymorphonuclear leukocytes. Prostaglandins regulate smooth muscle contraction, stimulate uterine contraction during delivery, can cause vasodilation, again, increased vascular permeability, increased sensitivity to pain, bronchoconstriction. It is one of the treatments for this is non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs or NSAIDs. So if you have certain types of allergies, you may have a prescription NSAID that you take to counter those reactions. Again, there's these cellular reactions that take place during an allergic reaction. Another type 1, here's where you get the headache, get increased blood flow, so you get the dilated blood vessels, so the skin starts to take on that sort of red attention of your flushed appearance. Increased peristalsis of the intestine can cause diarrhea and vomiting. Here's the runny nose and the watery eyes associated with histamine release primarily. I'm going to stop there for a moment and pick up with hay fever after a while.